Welcome back to another Evolutionary Astrology Zoom meeting. My name is Bradley Naragon, and today we're going to get into, here we go, Shadows of Jupiter in Libra Part 2. And you may have seen Part 1. There's our little introduction screen. This is going to go about 35 minutes through the slides, and then we're going to have a little Q&A talk about the material. So we're picking up where we left off last time, but before we jump into Part 2 and explore what I'm calling inviting the rejected as a path to collective healing, I want to share what I mean when I say an archetype's shadow expression. I do believe that collective stories are inside us, the good, the bad, the beautiful, and the ugly. As each microcosm mirrors the larger macrocosm, so we all possess in our own psyches parts of ourselves our conscious minds reject. In writing our own story from inside our lenses of perception of the world, it's common to portray ourselves in the way we want to see ourselves. In this sense, Zeus the asshole lives inside each of us. However, the story we tell ourselves, who we are, is likely not all of who we are. We don't want to see or believe we are capable of some of the things we are. So we convince ourselves we don't have aspects of evil within. This disowning is dangerous because it sets up the stage for projection. This projection then fosters an us versus them consciousness, an inner environment which can easily lead to victim consciousness and judgments grow. There becomes a self-denial that occurs, which can easily lead to projecting our own shadow onto others, combined with a sense of self-righteousness that we are above, beyond, more mature than such and such. Many don't want to believe that patriarchy, racism, and destructive, hurtful behaviors exist within us somewhere, somehow. All the atrocities I'm speaking of, we are all not separate from this. If we truly search ourselves and are honest with ourselves, we may very well find similar motivations exist within us, behaviors we detest and judge and label when others act them out. The nature of a shadow is that you forget it exists. When the light shines bright, there may very well be places within obscured by the darkness of the shadow we cast. We cast a shadow simply by existing. We can be brilliant, so wonderful, so great, and so loving in so many ways, but we still have a blind spot from the shadow we cast. Patriarchal culture in the modern world, with its focus on the outer world, outer gain and progress, fails to honor the value of pausing and turning inward long enough to encounter the many parts of who we are, the chapters and stories in our epic saga that we don't want to reread. Because these unconscious aspects of self still exist, seeking to be resolved by our soul, these shadows will come out into play and shape who we are. This could be as simple as resisting seeing something about ourselves, and so we become it, even if just for a moment, so our self can bear witness to this rejected part of ourself. The shadow needs to be seen and will eventually show up as a blessing in disguise. The whole idea of calling this talk The Shadows of Jupiter in Libra is because the ongoing story we're writing inside our mind, which constantly shapes our consciousness, influences the fabric of all that we weave within our conversations and behaviors, playing with and coloring the canvas of our relationships and social experiences, Libra. Do we realize the degree to which this phenomena occurs? Talking about an archetype's shadow expression gives us an opportunity to potentially see in a new way the same scenarios we participate in within our day-to-day lives. Our perception of and the meanings within our interactions correlate to Jupiter and Libra. The goal? Seeing our shadows leads to discovering the ways we participate, which we don't fully understand in the past. We have a story around how we participate and why things happen as they did. Typically, we just roll along with our own version of the story. The intent is self-analysis and exploration. Asking ourselves if we fully understand how our behaviors are creating a life and consciousness we are responsible for generating and perpetuating from within. I've attempted to unravel the intersections of social injustice and oppression within the world, of self-identification with being a victim, the blaming and judgment upon others which follows this, and one's perception of their own responsibility within the drama of their own life. I mention this because I think it gets tricky pretty quick to both address injustice, inequality, and oppression, while simultaneously not going into shaming, blaming, and/or victim consciousness. When stuck in blame and anger, we go into inner places from which we lose sight of our responsibility. I think that relative to the evolutionary astrology paradigm, wherein all individuals are responsible for the karma they've created, and the soul chooses the circumstances for their lifetime to catalyze their soul's evolution within ego form. It gets tricky to state why, how, and when the intersection of individual karma meets social, local, regional, cultural, racial, and collective karma. All this karma playing out in a world which is not fair, a world where chaos, injustice, and evil often reign. In the end, each of us is only accountable to ourselves. Within us, we will find everyone else, every relationship, and every story we ever participated in. Part 2, inviting the rejected. Eris, goddess of discord, is perhaps most famous in mythic stories for disrupting the wedding party of Peleus and Thetis, and I probably am not pronouncing this correctly. The rest of the gods and goddesses were invited, but Eris was intentionally excluded. I believe a key message from Eris for humanity is that we can heal collective wounds by inviting the voices that have been excluded and ignored. This is the key to understanding the evolutionary path of Jupiter and Libra right now. Uranus is astrology's archetype of freedom, liberation through casting off conditioning, which has been an obstacle to our freedom. Together, Eris and Uranus, at the polarity point to Jupiter and Libra, speak of learning through inclusion of those who have not been invited over and over. Uranus and Eris demand we shake up our reality, waking up to the ignored voices within the collective conversation. Uranus and Aries symbolizes the potential to liberate the anger and rage of the hurt and ignored. All cultures within systematic patriarchal influence have subcultures which have been rejected by the dominant culture. All of these subcultures, sometimes for, little typo, sometimes for long, long periods of time, have symbolically been the Eris of the gods and goddesses. there exists the pain of exclusion and oppression. One thing to remember here, this T-square of Pluto and Capricorn squaring Jupiter in Libra and Uranus in Aries and Eris in Aries symbolizes awakening the roots of an oft-suppressed anger and pain going back generations and generations, back to the roots of patriarchy itself. Presently, anger, hurt, and stories are surfacing through increasing cracks in the crumbling facade of patriarchal cultural control. A global collective wound surrounding patriarchal culture is the disempowerment and devaluing of the feminine. Goddesses such as Eris and Lilith represent the deep feminine anger and rage because of legacies of atrocities. Along with patriarchy came the stories that women are not valuable beyond physical beauty, childbirth, and work in the home. The feminine's reaction to atrocities of killing, rape, abuse, and oppression, a deep rage, has been denied voice and expression. Expression of this comes with the potential backlash of a wide variety of consequences. Without physical threat, there is still the labeling of being unstable, over-emotional, causing trouble, crazy, and much worse. Healing this collective wound means reclaiming original feminine power, value, knowledge, and healing traditions. A root many have forgotten and are in the process of rediscovering. Relative to patriarchal conditioning, the feminine has been limited to the social Libra role and the Cancerian roles of mother, home, and being the, quote, emotional ones. In evolutionary astrology, polarities are the evolutionary path. Relative to being boxed into the Cancer and Libra archetypes, the polarities of Capricorn and Aries are the healing pathways. The Aries journey of individual self-discovery and the Capricorn experiences of having social authority and recognition are medicine for this healing. Of course, all people have a need for healing. As much as the feminine needs healing, so does the masculine. This is not just by gender identification. This extends to the feminine and masculine within all of us. Relative to Jupiter and Libra, men as a group have work to do around learning to listen to the feminine. Failure to listen in a moment can be related to the many distractions of the modern world. However, deep within, there is conditioning which has taught men to not hold the words of women with honor and value. Before one listens, one needs to become aware of the value of what is being shared. Men have the work of expanding consciousness beyond the stories which taught us to devalue and ignore the wisdom of the feminine. In patriarchal culture, men are taught to disconnect from our own feminine emotional sides. Emotions are a sign of weakness. This has resulted in a phenomena of males projecting their disowned emotions onto the women in their lives. This then perpetuates a story that women, now expressing this disowned emotion, are weak, unstable, and unpredictable. The masculine has been conditioned to do the Aries role of war and individual action without cooperation, and the distorted Capricorn, head of household. This gender assignment is maintained by being in control and being right. With such an emphasized Aries and Capricorn conditioning, the masculine's healing path and evolution are discovered within the polarities of Libra and Cancer. The positive aspects of Libra include equality in relationships, learning to listen, learning from others who are different, sharing power, and cooperation. Developing the Cancer archetype within means to own value, and learn from one's own emotions, giving emotions the space to be our teacher. In astrology, Aries correlates with the youth. With Aries as the polarity point to Jupiter and Libra, another theme within the topic of learning from inclusion is discovering how to include the youth within the collective conversation. A small example. In the United States, last election, it was reported that only 15% of people ages 18 to 29 voted. This alone is a strong statement of the perceived meaninglessness of the country's democratic process. But why? What do the voices of the youth value and envision? How can the youth find or discover their right work in the world, work that is actually meaningful and rewarding? Sure, there is a need to discover this for oneself, but with increasing shared power, more opportunities emerge within the social sphere to participate meaningfully. When the voice of the next generation is given social space to be heard, a greater collaborative process can begin. Aries' natural square to Capricorn represents the natural tension in any culture between the established elders and the youth. This is a natural tension. Cultures who are emotionally healthy know the importance of engaging and including the next generation. How can we engage the upcoming generation? How can we hear their voice right now? How do we invite in instead of exclude? In the USA, the Black population continues to be disempowered and silenced to an extreme, more than any other race or culture in the States. For the USA, Eris within the culture correlates to so many subcultures and groups. I want to now give special attention and time to the African Americans as a subculture within the US. The reality of what has been going on for centuries correlates to more than exclusion. Slavery and genocide exist today in twisted new forms. The Eris archetype is feared at a distance. You don't want to go there. You want to keep things peaceful and comfortable and avoid getting into the problem. Just like in the myth of Eris, the so-called problem did not create the problem. Individuals within the dominant culture chose exclusion, violence, and abuse to maintain control and power. The roots of this oppression run so deep. The invisibility of being Black in the USA is similar to the way Eris was completely ignored. No one wanted to deal with the pain created by this exclusion, but it is not to be escaped. The message of Uranus and Eris and Aries is demanding the people of the USA, especially white privileged persons, wake up and hear the voices and messages from the Black community and all oppressed communities. For white people in the USA, there has been a taught, culturally conditioned fear response to Black men stepping into their own power and speaking up. To me, this supports my correlation of African Americans in the USA to Eris's story. With Eris, there is surrounding fear of the chaos and disruption of the status quo. Eris was simply made into the enemy and created to be a threat due to how she was treated. Relative to this, and to the fact we live in a male-dominated culture, still, Black men in particular correlate to Eris. While Black men have been repeatedly projected on as if they are an imminent threat by simply existing, Black women have been essentially invisible and unnoticed within the social sphere. Who did you notice first in this picture? The Black man in the New York Yankees cap, or the Black woman in the foreground? A simple example of this, I read somewhere recently that Michelle Obama was regularly going for walks alone, leaving the White House by herself, but no one knew. And she didn't need special security escort because she was already invisible in the world. The present moment is another calling to listen to the unheard voices of African Americans within the USA. Expect pain, hurt, and rage to come through once finally given a chance for inclusion. What, now you care? How believable is it? Our actions speak louder than our words. It will be uncomfortable, but that's part of the point. The comfort is an illusion anyway. As a country, the USA has institutionally incarcerated Black people more than any other people. Between incarceration and parole, we have almost 3 in 100 adults dealing with the prison systems at any moment. Each year, over 11 million US citizens go to jail. While Blacks make up 13% of the US population, they account for 40% of those incarcerated. Most white people in the USA have had the privilege to live ignorant of how stressful it is to be Black in the USA. When we consider all the arrests and the millions not currently in jail, it's obvious our Black communities have remained the uninvited, devalued voice in the USA. Van Jones said, as quoted in a recent Vanity Fair article, "The statistics are shocking. Black men make up about 6.5% of the US population, but 40.2% of the prison population consists of Black men. They're imprisoned at much higher rates than white men, even if they commit similar crimes. Latino men and Black women also face disproportionately high imprisonment rates. As 13th argues, this is the result of years of racially charged legislation that effectively strips people of their rights once they've been through the system. Jupiter in Libra is, at best, just and fair in the eye of the law." Van Jones has a show called The Messy Truth, kind of perfect title for a Libra South node with Jupiter in Virgo conjunct the sun. I see Van Jones as one positive male role model who shines with these positive characteristics of speaking and sharing the messy truth. In a white middle-class neighborhood, one shooting becomes a major news story. Meanwhile, we have our people getting shot and killed daily in our cities, and it's not news. Why? Yes, patriarchy, white supremacy, institutional oppression, racism, and perhaps it also has to do with a deep fear of encountering the pain, which has been ignored for so long. You know when you have the hardest thing in your life to deal with or address, so you constantly don't deal with it, and it keeps getting worse as a result of the neglect, which makes you even more afraid to go there. This is akin to what is occurring in society in the USA, ignoring our own social dis-ease. The privilege of ignoring this grows thin. Some wake up to the messy truth. Others update their story to normalize it. Uranus and Eris, in square to Pluto and Capricorn, and opposing Jupiter and Libra, are saying, you all can't keep ignoring this. Wake up. But how do we do this? That's the starting point. Motivation for Uranian change and the question of what to do, now coupled with the openness to learn. You know the expression, one bad apple ruins the lot. And in case you can't read this, it says, under the Eris on the apple, it says, she would not have made the golden apple that created the mess. One bad apple ruins the lot. When I consider this expression in light of the goddess who threw the apple of discord, it means that if one of us is suffering, it spoils everything for everyone. If you're in a room and someone is wallowing in pain, crying out in discomfort, it's uncomfortable for everyone in that room until that person is soothed or gets some care and relief. Or you grow accustomed to it, it becomes the norm, you begin to cope with the unpleasant. White supremacy in the USA has gone to great lengths to protect and maintain its privilege through out of sight, out of mind tactics. Separating us from seeing and experiencing the pain, the awareness of the totality of the people's experiences fades as the personal becomes emphasized. We're taught by actions of others that somehow the suppression and injustice is normal and okay, and we're still entitled to live our American daydream. We're taught the problem is bigger than us. We don't have a solution. It's too complicated. It's been this way for so long, it's become normal. To many, we don't have to deal with it on the daily. And however, if we really analyze our society, we see an enormous hole in our collective and individual hearts. There is a void of pain we can't fill or numb with all the drugs, TV, possessions, and distractions of the world. Living the dream, but waking up from the nightmare. We can wake up and realize we've been bamboozled. One hurting person or group does hurt the whole. We were born into it, we inherited it, and we normalized it to cope with the pain. I'm not saying those with privilege or the karma of a life of ease need to feel unworthy and shame for living a bountiful, relatively low stress life. What I'm trying to say is that it needs to be acknowledged that oppression exists, and it's a hell of a lot harder and more stressful to achieve a stable, bountiful, and uplifting life in the USA when you are Black. Part of the pathway to heal this pain is through open acknowledgement of this reality and through the inclusion of the voices of communities who have been ignored. What we really need is the collective attention and minds of our brightest leaders to be in the social positions of power to make real change and transform our cities, our economy, our social networks, our government. We need a revolution. We need media to shine the spotlight on every organization and leader that is making a real difference, sharing this knowledge with the whole. We need TV shows where people are putting their heads together to figure out how to uplift, heal, and change our current social conditions. We've known the revolution will not be televised, but thanks to technology, we have increases in the voice of oppressed communities and the people reach the collective. Black Lives Matter has been fueled not by an upsurge in violence toward Black people, but by actual reporting of the facts, thanks to technology, social media, brave individuals, the internet. Watch out for distractions of new news. By raising other issues in people's awareness, the Black Lives Matter movement could fade into the background of the media's eye and public awareness. This has been the pattern and part of the problem. Keep the stories going, they need to be heard. Institutional oppression and societal abuses of power have fewer places to hide today. A greater potential exists for public exposure of injustice, inequality, abuses of power, and passive-aggressive forms of genocide. If you don't see actual physical genocide, consider the spiritual, emotional, and mental genocide which continues. Not supporting individuals to personally identify as victims of oppression, but what we do within our individual consciousness and the story we tell ourselves about who we are, who we really are, is a very powerful one. However, in the words of Neil deGrasse Tyson, The good thing about science is that it's true whether you believe it or not. So if you look at the science and math and statistics around demographics and incarcerations, well, it's not just a matter of opinion. It's a scientifically provable fact. So when someone says we all have equal opportunity in this country to succeed, then they're clearly ignorant or in denial of proven facts. We're all keeping our stories going. Perhaps the intention of meditation and spirituality is to actually be able to stop the story, the inner story which we keep rolling with every day, hour, and minute of our lives. Stories we get caught in which generate separation and suffering. Perhaps the higher potential of a psychedelic trip is to be able to stop tripping out on the stories and reach a place where we objectively see threads of consciousness long enough to actually be here now. We're living in constant stories. We begin to identify with the stories, but our true spiritual root is not these stories. Our true power, beauty, and brilliance exists beyond all the stories which constantly keep going inside the mind. Power exists when we bear witness. With Neptune and Chiron and the South Node all in Pisces presently, it's like we're all collectively facing the anywhere but here and now phenomena. How do we stay present facing our struggles and emotional pain? It comes from within. I put that picture up there because DeJuan Patterson is a black man who was mugged, then shot in the head. And then when the police came on the scene, they treated him violently as if he was the criminal, first responders. And there's a fantastic interview by Jonathan Capehart. And I was in tears. There's this moment where DeJuan Patterson just says, like, I'm not a victim, I'm a victor. It's great. It's a great interview. So I was going to stop there, and I have more material, but perhaps we'll do a part 3 if you all want it. I wanted to open up for some discussion, and I'm going to cut sharing my screen here. Let's see, stop share. There we go. Okay.
Great. Oh, thank you, Bradley. That was amazing. Thank you so much. Okay, here we are on the panel. So any questions or any comments?
Hi, Bradley. It was really beautiful what you shared. I have a question about Jupiter in Libra. I feel like people can be very relative to everybody, and it seems people can put meanings into words. So in that way, it's like you can, it's like there is no absolute truth. What's true is relative to everybody. Like they can believe anything. What do you see this part of shadow of the Jupiter in Libra?
That's a great question, and I've been thinking about that a lot, and just in the last couple years, where I've seen some really hard situations in my kind of larger personal sphere. And one of the things that was a breakthrough to me personally, and what I saw as a little more deconstruction of patriarchal conditioning in my own consciousness, was to realize that it's like how I'm seeing this is valid and true, but the other person's story is also true. It's just as true for their experience as it is for me. Mine is for mine. And I think that gets tricky because I think, you know, that like taking truth to the ultimate level, which is obviously the Pisces Neptune place with it. Like I feel like all of us are like, well, what ultimately is true here? And so if we go to that place and do it in a way where we dismiss someone else's story and the validity of how that story holds truth and meaning for them, it's tricky, you know, and I don't know. I mean, I guess my perception of that is like, it's almost like a healthy Jupiter in Libra is so, you know, it's the natural law of you know, everyone has a piece. Everyone's story is valuable, and it's not about, you know, saying it's not true or taking it to some other level. Sometimes it's just a sharing of the story.
Bradley,
Yes.
I think you knocked your microphone off. We couldn't
Oh.
hear the last thing you said. Are you back again now? So perhaps
Okay.
just the last sentence that, if you could repeat that, please.
Okay. I think I was just saying, like, just sometimes the sharing of the story is like what's really most important, and getting out of that sense of if it's true or if it's right, which is, I think, what we do in relative to conditioning of consciousness.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
So Bradley, do you think if somebody is expressing some really hard to take attitude, like for example, the wall being built between the Americans and the Mexicans, a friend of mine over here in Australia just, you know, got really angry about it, and she said, well, they're taking all the jobs, and, you know, and she was really believed in this great wall, and I just, instead of blowing my top and getting angry and saying anything, I just said, I am non-political and I don't want to be drawn into this, because I just felt if I got drawn into it, I'd be getting drawn into her shit. So I don't know. I feel for me, it's best not to say anything. What do you think?
You know, I mean, I suppose it's like whatever each of us feels in that moment with the person that we're with, right? I mean, there's no real one way to go about it. And yeah, you know, I mean, you could have that same thing happen potentially and end up actually really listening to each other. And I think, you know, like one of the keys perhaps would be is, would that person be willing to actually really listen to you if you were going to share? Or are they so set in what they see as right? Because if they're starting off as not even listening, then we have an inequality from the get-go. So I don't know.
Yeah, but from my point of view, it was, what she was saying was so ugly that I really just wanted to put a stop to it rather than go into it.
Mm-hmm.
So in a sense, I'm sort of pushing it away from me because it's just too ugly to actually face up to.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, we all got to do what we got to do.
Yeah, but at the same time, I could see that that was her reality and that was her opinion, and, you know, that she had a right to her opinion, and, you know, that sort of thing.
Those are kind of, and it's like, I feel like what I've seen happen in the United States recently is this, all the issues that are up are creating more separation. And someone posted about what's been going on in Venezuela for years, and they kind of described the same phenomena. And it was really interesting because they were basically saying, if we keep feeding into the expected story of how we're going to react and respond, we're also feeding into the dualism of within the collective consciousness. I don't know, I've just been kind of thinking about that a lot. And I'm definitely saddened by the sense of increasing gap between people when we have a lot in common. You know, as a people, we all have we have a lot in common, but it's becoming increasingly focused on how we perceiving things differently. But you know, we're like, we have a common goal.
I guess it must be essential for the collective at the moment to look at this question of race and the colour of skin, which correlates to Pluto in Capricorn. And so Pluto correlates to the melatonin in the skin, the colour. And, you know, and that Pluto T-squaring Jupiter and Uranus is potentially, you know, the liberation from this false idea, this false belief. So I see it as absolutely necessary to happen at the moment, and just to, you know, let it unfold and to have faith in it, that things may change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I mean, in a lot of ways, there's just a lot of really exciting things happening in the world, and there's a lot of connections and stories that are, I think I said this on the first one, you know, it's like these stories are coming out now that we haven't gotten to hear from people, and it's you know, it's beautiful, it's amazing, it's tragic, it's sad, it's, you know, it's everything.
But that's really fascinating. Like if Eris represents this particular kind of person that is victimized and, you know, and held down just because of the color of their skin. Well, I suppose you could see it in any chart. Could you?
Yeah, I mean, I you know, it's like kind of when I started that whole idea that it's in all these things are in all of us. So I do believe that, you know, we have that Eris within us. We have part of ourself that has been denied freedom of expression and action. So we can contact that within ourselves. And then, I mean, for me, going on this larger journey of this exploration it was kind of a new idea, where I came to start correlating Eris in that way, in particular at when you compare a larger collective to the characters in the myth. And so yeah, I suppose, you know, in any culture there's going to be you know, the group that is playing that out somewhat, you know.
Yes, thanks, Bradley. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I was thinking like the nodes are changing sign in May, and the south node will be moving into Aquarius, and I was wondering if we are not going to see a bit more just being disconnected from the reality.
Oh, yeah. Right. Yeah. And I mean, you're right, because I mean, in Aquarius does correlate with the disassociation and the disconnect. And at a social level, it kind of makes me think of where you like put yourself outside of the group, you're on the sidelines and you're not really involved. That's definitely going to be one piece of it. And I would imagine it's probably also going to fuel even more of a sense of a need to rebel from the things that are not natural, that are going on.
And even see like the North Node in Leo, like maybe even more narcissists, you know, like, you know, you know, it's, and
Yeah.
I was thinking Donald Trump does have the conjunction Sun Uranus in Leo in his chart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So might that even activate him badly.
Yeah, and well, and I know I've had this conversation within the evolutionary astrology sphere at different times, like the shadow of that Pluto and Leo generation, you know, which doesn't have that objective awareness of its place within the larger community, is like me first.
Me first.
Feeding, yeah, the narcissist, like you said. And so that would be one shadow of that North Node transiting Leo, that it would be like, and it kind of makes me think of, you know, Pluto and Capricorn, where it's just like the clinging to the existing structure that of reality that's giving you this power and life of luxury of what you want. So yeah, that would be one one more potential shadow.
One more.
Probably see.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, any more questions?
Bradley, I had one, I don't know if it's not really a question, thought, but trying to go on off of what Marie brought up. I have noticed quite a while ago, people refer to law enforcement, Leo, law enforcement officer, which I thought was very, and these are people who are not even in astrology. And just thinking about that as far as with the North Node going into Leo, with Jupiter still being in Libra, to me, and I don't know, maybe it's because I come from that other, you know, that other point of view, that outsider, it doesn't, it's hard to keep the faith, you know.
So yeah, Bradley, I think my favorite little phrase here was the messy truth.
Yeah.
I just really like it. Just, you know, it's very courageous and leading somewhere, I think.
Yeah, that was a Van Jones thing. I just, yeah, when I read that, I was like, that's so perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I
Bradley.
heard that correlation to Leo and law enforcement before. That's interesting. I can see how it kind of makes sense, you know, whereas like the will of the ruler is carried out by the enforcement of the law. So that's interesting. Thanks.
Yeah, that's the acronym that people have used for when they were speaking of the police and law enforcement. They spelled it out, LEO.
Oh, I thought.
Okay. Oh gosh. Okay. Thank you.
I misheard that. I thought you said love enforcement officer.
No.
Oh, interesting. I was thinking love. I'm thinking, yeah, Leo, love enforcement officer.
Yeah, that's just when I first saw it in comments of, you know, various videos that I was watching. Like I said, this was news, not even nothing astrology based. And when I saw that, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. It's always amazing how, you know, astronomers named the planets, and like it's just like they have that rule where they're going to name all trans-Neptunian planets after creation deities, and it's just like, it's kind of funny because I always think of this astronomy community as I mean, it's my own idea that it's very left-brained scientific, but just the holographic nature of the universe, that, you know, these correlations to the names, and it's always kind of amazing.
Yeah, Bradley, and although it can feel really messy at the moment, Jupiter is now in the social sphere of Libra, so it's past the Aries Virgo signs, and now it's in the social sphere, and it's moving ahead. So I guess that's a pretty great thing.
Yeah, that's a good point in the 12-year journey of it. Thanks. Yeah.
So Bradley, do you feel you'd like to wind down the meeting now, or continue a bit longer?
Yeah, we're about at 7. I mean, unless someone else has a burning question or comment, which I'd love to hear.
Perhaps also Libra correlates to extremes. So before we can get that balance, we really need that pendulum to swing to the utter extreme of whatever situation within ourselves as well. And then just let it swing back until it finds that balance, I guess, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And thanks everybody for attending. And we'll see you for part 3, shall we? Oops, Tashi.
Bye.
Tashi, unfortunately, you're distorting. So are we going to see you for part 3, Bradley?
Yeah, if I'm welcome back, I'd love to do a part 3.
I'd love it. Absolutely love it.
Thank you. Very interesting.
So thanks, everyone, and we'll see you in part 3. Thanks again, Bradley.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.